From the deepest, darkest recesses of Dangerous Nerds headquarters, Keith Moncrief and Gerry Kissel.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Pop Culture Minefield. That guy down below there, that's Keith.
Hey, and that's Gerry.
And our special guest over here is Graham Nolan, whom I've been friends with for about a decade now. And he is apparently a well-known comic book artist.
Yes!
No, I just thought he was a guy that liked John Wayne like I do.
I'm a legend in my own mind.
Yes!
Oh, no. You're more than just that. You are the co-creator of Bane.
Bane.
Come on.
I will break you.
I will break you. Hunt me no longer.
Yeah, the guy who probably spends a lot of time getting kicked in the nards just to show how tough he is. Go ahead, I can take it. Well, Graham, welcome to the show. Let's start out and let's talk about your history, because what was the first comic book you worked on?
Well, the first comic book was something for DC called New Talent Showcase. The editor of that book, Sal Amendola, was my sequential art.
It was number 16, wasn't it?
Somewhere around there, 14, 16, something like that.
I seem to remember 16 for some reason.
Well, I did a couple of them. They were both projects that I did for class, and the teacher liked them and bought them for the comic book that he was editing. So that was actually my first job. Were 2 school assignments.
Well,
that's fantastic. How old were you?
I was 22, 23, something like that. I think 22.
Well.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like yesterday, one of the things that impressed me with Kevin Van Hook was he started at 17. And I'm like, geez.
Wow.
I'm like, that's young, you know.
Jim Sherry started at 13.
Yeah, well, my son, was like that too. I mean, it took me till I was 18 or 19 to master drawing hands, and he was mastering it at 13. And he doesn't do art for his living. He writes, but he's a hell of an artist. How old were you when you? I mean, because hands are one of the hardest things to draw in comics, in my opinion.
Right. How long before I mastered them? Probably when I was 40.
Now, did you not go to Joe Kubert School?
I did. I didn't graduate. I went a year, took a year off because I ran out of money. Came back for a second year, ran out of money again. And then I just started, I worked in advertising for a little bit and worked on my portfolio. I'd go into the city once a week. I'd make appointments to editors. You could do that back then. And, show my stuff around. And, you make connections too. You make, you form relationships, which was great. I'd always go in on Thursdays because a bunch of the guys would all go out to pubs afterwards. So I'd go out there with Dick Giordano and Ernie Colon and Gray Morrow and Sal Amendola and all these, old time guys. And I'd just sit there listening to them tell stories and stuff. And it was awesome. And, sometimes I'd go into the bar. It was called the Bottom of the Sixes because DC Comics was at 666. Is it 5th Avenue, I think? Something like that back then, or 57th Street, somewhere around there. And anyway, at the bottom of the bar, a lot of these New York bars always serve food at happy hour. So I'd go down there, I'd buy 1 beer, nurse it, and then go back and, starving artist, just eat all my goodies.
Hell yeah. Keith, you got any questions you want to jump in with?
I was just going to ask, most people when they start out in art, they usually, when they're younger, get into the habit of being able to free draw whatever characters. What was your go-to easy character that you used to doodle, draw a lot when you were just starting out?
Well, I probably first started out drawing monsters because I like monster movies and monster magazines before I discovered comics. So I was probably drawing Frankenstein, square shapes, that kind of stuff. And then comic wise, it was probably Batman, just because, or Batman or Spider-Man, because they were easy, easily recognizable. Like if I drew, a more complicated character, people wouldn't know who I was drawing per se, but you could always tell I was drawing Spider-Man or Batman.
Wow.
What was the first monster? Was it Kong or Godzilla?
It was Frankenstein.
Oh.
Yeah, first monster movie I ever saw was Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. I was about 6 years old. My mom let me watch it because I really wanted to watch it. She was doing laundry, so I had to lay in her bed and watch it while she was in there, and it scared the Wolfman scared the piss out of me, because I'd see this nice guy, turn into this guy, and he'd get those beady eyes, those shifty eyes that go back and forth. He scared me. But Frankenstein, I always kind of related to. I thought he was like the hero monster, the monster that was misunderstood. And then obviously he goes and he kicks Wolfman's ass, and I thought that was cool too.
Yeah, because I love the juxtapositioning of the nice guy becomes the monster, with Lawrence Talbot, becoming the werewolf. It's
Right.
like, I don't want to be this thing. Oh, and then he changes and becomes this hideous, horrifying, flesh-eating thing.
Yeah, the whole premise of that movie is he wants to die. That's why he's trying to find the Dr. Frankenstein to help him find death, because he was dead and he came back after those guys robbed the grave and awakened him from his lycanthropy slumber.
God. Yeah, it's a great film. Classic stuff. Now, let's segue into the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And Keith, I know, has some questions about the 90s.
Oh, man.
Hope I can remember.
Well, look. As I think, as I indicated before, the 90s was definitely a decade that, as far as the comic book industry was concerned, a lot of people that weren't really initially fans of comics were finding their way in. Mm-hmm. And you had this big push forward and expanding the reach of comics. And then you had magazines like Wizard that were turning everybody into rock stars. So you came along at a time and was working at DC during a period of time of where there was a lot of interest in new eyes on everything that was going on, and you thrived and created these incredible pieces of art for every issue that you worked on. I mean, in that time period, do you remember a lot of pressure? Did you realize that, or were you concentrating just on your job and keeping it going? What was that like?
The 90s was an interesting period. It's sort of a divisive period in comics, and I have mixed feelings about the 90s, comic-wise. There really wasn't a lot of new people coming in. There were speculators coming in, not readers. So you had speculator dollars coming in, driving up those sales numbers like crazy. And we're, in fact, starting the beginning of losing readerships because publishers were concentrating on stunts. The image guys didn't help either by creating, basically pages of art that they could resell that had no narrative to it. They were doing posters and stuff like that. And, readers, just, they didn't feel like they were getting a story's worth. They're just, fancy poster art. And so we lost a lot of those readers. And unfortunately, comics reading is cyclical and always has been. People will read it up until a certain age, and, guys will discover girls then. And and they leave comics, but then they come back to them later on. That was the paradigm before. Those kids that grew up reading comics don't have that same kind of attachment to them, and so we lost them. That was a generation lost. They didn't come back, and that's one of the downfalls and the shame about what was going on. It was very short-sighted in the 90s. You mentioned Wizard World or Wizard. Turning guys into rock stars. Yeah, they had their top 10 list and all of that. I never made it. I never was on that list because my style was always concentrated on storytelling, which got branded as old school and all that kind of stuff. I didn't, my approach was to put less lines in than more lines, because as one of my favorite cartoonists said to Alex Toth, Roy Crane said to him, take every line out that doesn't tell your story, and with what's left, draw the hell out of it. And that's the approach that I always took, is try to simplify it, and in that simplification, making it more complex.
Wow.
Bam!
Go ahead.
Yeah, mind blown. That's it. Boom. What I find interesting is because I like that you're one of my friends that will call me when you catch me cheating on some of my artwork, and I love it. You call me out on it, and I'm like, you fucker.
When did I do that?
Oh,
I didn't.
You caught me because I built a 3D model and I didn't feel like drawing a forklift, so I rendered it as a 2D object, and you were like, "That's a 3D model, isn't it?" I'm like, "Yeah, it is."
Hey, I use them.
Oh, I know you do, but you're much better at hiding it. I don't even bother sometimes, because I'm doing the writing and drawing and also doing other work for money.
Right.
and so I rush through things, and you called me on it. I'm like, God damn, you're going to make me work hard for this. Because I told somebody one day, I said, yeah, I work hard because Graham Nolan's my friend, and he will call me when he call me on it when he spots that I used the 3D model and didn't bother to actually draw it. But that segues into the whole background thing, because like one of my favorite stories when I watched that movie about Frank Frazetta was how when he was always under the gun, he had Bernie Wrightson and Al Williamson to come in and help him with backgrounds and shit like that. Did you ever find any of that happening when you were working, or did you have any bonds with other artists that worked with you, or did you develop everything when you were drawing a panel?
Everything, yeah. I never used assistants or worked in a studio system where I had guys where, hey, can you do this while I'm working on this? No, I've always done it all myself.
That's because you're a dick, right? I don't want to work with you. No, because I always love your buildings.
The guys that I admired, were the workhorses. The guys like Kirby and Buscema and Kane.
Oh yeah.
It was all about deadline back then. It was one of the things they drilled into me back in the day at Cubert School is, if you mess up a deadline, it's not likely that editor's going to call you again. Nowadays, it's like if you make a deadline, they're just shocked. We thought it was just a suggestion.
It's sort of there's a lot of buffer around that.
Yeah, what's the point? The old guys like Julie Schwartz, man, if you blew his deadline, you were out. And some of those old guys, if you messed with them that way, it could cost the publisher a lot of money.
Yeah, especially with monthlies. Those monthly floppies, man. If you don't meet that deadline, it screws up the whole thing. Especially with since DC and Marvel went with Diamond, and Diamond's very strict about those schedules.
Well, you also had printing contracts. You had to have X amount of books printed. So there was fees attached to that if they didn't get their quota. Then there was pre-press setup, all that kind of stuff. Some of that's gone now because of the files are digital, but there was cutting the plates, and there was a lot more to it back then too.
Oh yeah, it's like since the advent of the digital age, it's changed everything.
Yeah,
because I used to, one of my job was working in pre-press, and it's just that doesn't exist anymore. And a lot of people don't remember is the web press was the first one. It was back in the 80s when it came out. And once I saw that, it took really one person to operate this entire large press.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, that's the future. Once this everybody finds out about this, it changes everything. And it did. And but digital even changed it even further.
Oh, sure.
And And what I like, and I said this, and I'm sure that I was the one that talked enough about it around you that inspired you to start drawing or inking digitally. Because you and Richard Bonk are two that I talk to a lot about how it saves so much time. Because I don't even pencil anymore.
No,
I do a rough sketch in ink digitally, and then I go in and start inking, and that's how I do my art now. I don't bother anymore. And but you, my God, you still those beautiful freaking pencils, which I'm sure are in that thing behind you there, the file cabinet of
file
artwork.
cabinet. Oh, yeah, there's probably some in there. Yeah.
Yeah, because you have an artist cabinet way back there against the wall. And
My
that's
flat folder, my flat file folder back there. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm like,
The
I don't
original
have that. People are like, I have to buy some of your art. I'm like, you can just print it. I don't draw anymore on paper.
There's pluses and minuses to it. The Expendables project that I'm doing is the first time I'm doing something, a whole project completely digital. And
Oh,
part of that was because there's so much tech reference that was going to be needed, historical reference, basically
a
reference.
lot of weapons.
Oh, tons from different eras, costuming from different eras. And then the likenesses as well, trying to nail the likenesses of the actors. So I figured, well, if I have to make any changes, it's going to be a whole lot easier if I try this digitally. So I'm doing the whole thing on my iPad Pro in Procreate.
Good on you,
Oh.
man. That's awesome. Yeah, we're both pretty excited about the Expendables. We've been keeping up with it since it happened, and and
Well, I was just going to ask, how did you wind up in that project? I mean, how does someone like you wind up getting involved with Sylvester Stallone?
yeah, was it Chuck Dixon coming in first, or were both you brought in at the same time?
Well, Chuck is the conduit to Sly. Chuck had done some stuff for Sly before. In fact, I think he did a screenplay treatment for The Expendables 2 that they didn't use, but he established a relationship with Stallone. They kind of hit it off. They're both from Philly, so they had a really good rapport. And then he was talking to him one day, and Sly was telling him about this idea for a Expendables movie that he could never get made because the cost would be outrageous. And he told him it was Expendables Go To Hell. So Chuck had asked him who had the printing rights, for graphic novels and stuff. And he says, well, I do. And he says, well, what if we do this as a graphic novel? Because Sly's also a comic fan. So he was like, oh, okay, yeah, that sounds cool. And so that's how it all got started. It was really just a handshake deal. And, then Chuck contacted me. He said, do you want to do the Expendables? I told him I love the Expendables. I love those movies. And that's how I got on board.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm trying to find
That's
some
amazing.
artwork right now that I can put on screen.
Well, now, in working, I mean, obviously you're a fan of the big action films, being a fan of the Expendables. Do you find yourself referencing a lot of what you've grown up to love, monster films, action films? Do you find that bleeding through into a lot of your original work as well as your other professional work, hired work?
Certainly in my original work. I had written a series called Joe Frankenstein for IDW that Chuck was in on as well. And that was just strictly my love of, the monster movies and the action adventure stuff, because it's really a mashup of two genres, Universal monsters and action adventure films. And then my Monster Island series is sort of my love letter to the Kirby giant monster comics, the Toho stuff, Godzilla, and then my love of Roy Crane and aviation cartoons.
Wow.
I'm putting up some of your artwork right now. There's your drawing of Stallone.
Oh yeah,
from Expendables.
huh?
Part of it.
That's
It's
the
largest one
first drawing I did.
Yep, and of course this Phantom.
The ghost who walks.
So how did you wind up working on Lee Falk's The Phantom?
I took my own advice and spoke my mind when they asked me a question.
Imagine that. You spoke your mind?
Yeah, I know. Crazy. I originally tried to get Monster Island syndicated as a newspaper strip. So I sent samples out to all the syndicates. They loved it, but they all came back with the same answer, that they can no longer sell a continuity strip to newspapers. There's just no market for it. However, King Features said, hey, but we do have an opening on one of our strips is Rex Morgan MD. It's a soap opera strip. And I said, oh, well, that's nice, but I'd really like to do the Phantom. And he said, well, we don't have an opening on the Phantom. So I ended up doing Rex. And then I think 2-3 months later, I got a call saying, we got an opening on the Phantom. Do you want it? And that's how I got it.
Wow. Wow.
See, I like that because obviously you impressed somebody and they remembered you when that time came.
Yeah, I mean, it probably didn't hurt that I was a former Batman artist. Phantom, sort of Batman in the Jungle. So.
Wow.
Yeah, I know that in my book Vindicated Inc., I borrowed from one of your drawings of the Phantom to do one of my splash pages.
Oh yeah.
I even asked you permission because I said once you see it, it's going to be obvious. I'm borrowing from one of the angles where he's standing on a roof. Where he's standing on a roof with the moon behind him.
Oh, okay.
And it was like I fell in love with that, and I'm like, I'm stealing that.
Was that the cover I did for the Hermes Press book?
I think it is, yeah.
Where he's got the 245s?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. That's one of my all-time favorite covers.
Yeah, it's obviously mine too.
I instead of sticking him in the jungle, I stuck him in the Casbah, which is still Africa, North Africa now.
It's North Africa, that's right.
Yeah, and I wanted to kind of give a more mysterious kind of atmosphere and just get him out of the jungle, but still make it different,
Well, it allows you to draw more than just trees.
Yeah.
And villages. It's like, I like that.
There's a certain romanticism to it too,
Oh, thanks to Casablanca.
And Algiers. The movie Algiers.
Oh, Algiers, yes.
Yeah.
And of course, this leads into the passion of old films, because you and I have had many conversations online about old movies, and John Wayne in particular. Mm-hmm. And the lacking of today of good writers like we had when we were kids growing up, especially with comics, even going into the 80s, and it started dying off in the 90s, good writing in comics. Mm-hmm. And I like that you have hit a point in your career where you and Chuck both take that on directly by putting out your own books, like Monster Island in particular. Mm-hmm. And what led to Monster Island?
The original one that I published back in 1998 came about because I was disenfranchised or disenchanted, I should say.
That was in 98, right?
Yes. I was disenchanted with the way the business was going. Again, we're coming off all the foil stamp covers and the bag this and that and all the nonsense, and no solid stories. And also that the comics had become overtly violent, and the female characters are overly sexualized. The French cut outfits and all that nonsense. And I had 3 daughters, and they were young at the time, and DC would send me everything that they published, and I could not give them the comics that my mom could give me to read. The only things I could give them at the time were the Warner Brothers Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck stuff, the Batman animated series, and maybe 1 or 2 others. But I couldn't give them the real Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, Fantastic Four like my mom could. And I thought that was sad, you know. So I wanted to do a comic for my daughters that they could read and enjoy.
Yeah.
Also, that my friends could read and enjoy on a totally different level. The same way that you can watch a Bugs Bunny cartoon and be, 8 years old, but you can also be 58 years old and laugh your ass off too. So basically, I went to all ages, but not in the pejorative sense that's attached to that term. It was really truly something like you mentioned Casablanca. Casablanca is a movie for all ages, right? Because it fell under the Hays Commission laws and stuff like that, so you couldn't put a lot of stuff in that you could later on. But if you look at the thematic things that are going on in that thing, you're talking about infidelities, you're talking about Nazi atrocities, and things that are going on in concentration camps, very deep and heavy stuff, but presented in such a way that everybody can watch it without being disgusted or pissed off. So that's the approach I took.
Yeah, and it's I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things I want to mention is I admire that you are such a good family man, and that you're focused on your daughters and your marriage. And I was bragging about the fact that I know that I've become friends with someone when their mother or their spouse follows me on Facebook, and your wife follows me on Facebook.
Yeah.
She's always on my page, and I giggle about that.
Post.
And but how did you two meet?
We met. I was living in New Jersey because I was going into New York to show my portfolio all the time. Julie was from Buffalo, and we were both down in Florida. Her visiting her sister, who was living down there at the time, and my mom and my family was still down there. I went down for my sister's high school graduation, and all my buddies were still there. So we all went out to a club one night, and I met her at a nightclub while we were down there. And I called her up.
This in the 80s?
1985.
85, nice.
Yeah, we met in May of 85, and we were married in November of 85.
Wow.
Now, didn't you get your big job at DC in April of 85?
How's that?
Didn't you get hired at DC in April of 85?
No.
Oh, okay.
I didn't, other than the New Talent Showcase stuff, I actually hadn't done any more work at DC. I was actually, when I was dating her, I was working on the Transformers for Marvel.
Yeah, that was yep.
Yeah, I had there was a fill-in job that was supposed to be just basically an inventory story that they were going to stick in the bin, and sure shooting that was needed, and it was slated like a month later and got published, which was great because when we first got married, obviously, from 6 months from the time we met to the time we actually got married, we didn't have 2 shekels to scrape together, and we had to set up our apartment and all that kind of stuff. And, I didn't have any money taken out for taxes because I'm a freelancer. So, I was throwing that money into, getting the apartment all set up. So tax time comes and I owed a bunch of money. Even though I didn't make a ton of money, I still owed a bunch of money. And, so we weren't sure what we were going to do. And a royalty check for $5,000 came in from that Transformer story. And
nice.
Paid the taxes. It was great. It was meant to be.
I tell you, I get such a kick out of you and your family and your kids. Your daughters are so gifted.
Oh. They're all grown up now.
I know, like mine are all, well, we're all men of the same age, all of our kids are grown up now.
Yeah.
So it's like our hope is for grandkids.
I'm in no hurry.
Me either. Because my daughter just slays me. I don't know. You've seen my daughter on my page every once in a while. She's in her 20s now, and she called me one day and she's like, Dad, I'm a little nervous, and I'm like, oh God, no, not now. I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. Please don't. And then she allayed my concerns. No, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's all good. And it's like already I'm hitting that with her. It's like she's in a serious relationship, and it's like I'm eventually going to be a grandpa. I
How
mean,
old is she?
what's that?
How old is she?
She's 20.
20.
And she's still kicking butt because I brag about it all the time. She left home. It was already a manager at a restaurant at 18. And
Wow.
she was setting her ways. This is where I'm going. This is what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. You got me ready, Dad. I'm good to go. And she's not needed 1 ounce of help from me, not once.
Nice.
And that's when you know you've done your job. It's like, because like kids, I mean, I was an idiot. I didn't know what I was doing when I was 18. How about you?
Me, I knew what I wanted to do from the time I was 12.
Well, yeah, the art thing, I knew that, but
Yeah.
I didn't know how to get there. I had I didn't know anybody.
Right, right.
And I took my first job at 22 working for a magazine as an illustrator. And one of the first gigs I had was doing an ongoing comic strip for that magazine with Dr. Wayne Dyer. And that was also where I cut my teeth in writing because he didn't write the scripts. He approved the scripts. I wrote them.
Ah.
And it was all about positive thinking. And found out that I'm a positive person. I thought I was a jerk. Everybody said I was.
You're positive. You're a jerk.
I think that's why we're friends. But let's go back to another time where you first worked with Chuck.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like? How did you guys meet? And where the freak did Bane come from?
Well, Chuck and I go all the way back to 1986. I was working for Eclipse Comics. I was doing some stuff for them, and Chuck was writing Airboy and the backup feature Skywolf. And so I got offered like 3 or 4 issues of Skywolf, which is the first thing we did together was Skywolf. So that's how we ended up meeting, and we hit it off. We ended up meeting up with Bo Smith and Truman, Tim Truman, part of what became Truman's Four Winds Company. We all met in the Chicago Con back in like 1987, something like that. And so there was just a great friendship that struck up there between all of us, and it still goes on today.
Well, I know because I met Chuck because my first pro gig for a major publisher was IDW, and I worked on the A-Team.
Okay.
And I joked about it the other day. I said, yeah, if you become friends with Chuck, it's just the law of inevitability. You become friends with Graham. And I remember yours in my first conversation. It was over what we hate drawing.
Oh.
And I remember exactly what you said, and I know there's no way you remember what I said, because I had just finished that graphic novel, 120-page graphic novel on the Battle of Hastings.
Right.
And I had drawn about 88 to 100 pages of horses.
Yeah.
And I said, if I ever draw another horse again, I will be happy.
Yeah.
I hate drawing them. And but I remember what you hated. Huey helicopters and the fucking Predator.
Yes, that's true. That's very true. Although I'll say this, helicopters have gotten a lot easier with Google SketchUp.
Yes.
So now I can get the helicopters in proportion and in the angles I want, and I just drop them in, and then I draw them from that.
Well, exactly. It allows us to do 3-point perspective, whereas we used to have to do it manually. It cuts that completely out because you build your environment in that 3D atmosphere and get the right angle and then render it and then use that as an overlay and you draw over it.
Right.
And I love it. Google SketchUp is like one of the greatest gifts for artists. And it's another artist friend of mine that went to Joe Kubert School, John Alderink, that introduced me to it.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, John Alderink was a colorist for Marvel, but he's actually a really good artist.
Okay.
And John was a graduate of Joe Kubert School. Mm-hmm. And he introduced me to that stuff back in 2006. And I'm like, Once again, I see the future for having to cut corners. Because
Right.
Drew Struzan taught me that. He says, anytime you find a way to cut a corner, do it. It's not really cheating. It's all about what you're making per hour.
Well, it's like Woody used to say, don't draw what you can trace, don't trace what you can copy, don't copy what you can paste up.
Exactly. And I criticize people who like to criticize, like Drew Struzan and other artists who do a form of tracing. And because when you do it, when you set your paper or digital screen over top of a photograph, people go, oh, it's tracing. I don't like going, it might be tracing, but you make it look as good as these guys do, or even I do. Because I'm not like you. I'm not a comic book artist per se. I'm an illustrator because I didn't go to Joe Kubert School. I never learned the Marvel or DC way. And I envy you guys because, God, your stuff looks so good. Mine just looks like illustration. And you've got that classic style. Richard Bonk has it too, which I think that was when I introduced you to Bonk the first time, was stating, look how much he inks like you.
Richard's great. I like his stuff a lot. Really good inker.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
I love it when he inks my stuff. He makes it look so much better.
That's the inker's job, hopefully.
Save the artist.
Yeah, make me look like a genius.
But what was your favorite character you ever did? That wasn't yours.
Yeah. I love to draw the Joker. I love to draw.
I love your drawings of the Joker too.
Thank you. I love to draw Bane, obviously. There's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of characters I haven't gotten to do that I still have on my bucket list that I wanna eventually do some stuff with.
Well, you left the industry for a while, in the 2000s, as I recall.
That's what I was doing, syndicated strips.
Yeah, you were doing comic strips, and because it was like 2009, you started Sunshine, I think it was. Was it that was in 2009?
That's when I started putting it up online. I had been actually drawing those characters.
I know the alligator is you.
Pretty much. I mean, both. If you take an amalgam of Mel and Dink, that's me, because I do like technology, like Dink does, but I do like old stuff like Mel does, so I've kind of like taken a couple parts of my personality, split them, and created two different characters, that are opposites yet the best of friends.
I'm going to grab a screen cap of that so people know. Sunshine State. By the way, talking about Sunshine State, I picked up a long time ago that there is a slight New York accent in New Yorkers. I mean, in Floridians. I catch a lot of it, like buddies of mine from Florida. And I caught on to that one day, and I'm like, what is this weird Floridian accent? And I'm like, oh my God, that's a New York accent.
Yeah, like I say Florida.
Yeah.
That's
Florida.
Florida.
It's not Florida, it's Florida.
It's yeah, exactly.
And here we go.
Like Long Island.
Long Island. Yeah, you overpronounce that G.
Get that hard G, that Long Island.
Here we go. I want to open up this. Here we go. Sunshine State. Back out a little bit here.
Well, now let me just ask, what are some of the
that, of course, is Sunshine State right there.
Cool.
Yeah. Don't use that that link though. It's on Go. It's syndicated on the Go Comics site.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Or you just go to sunshinestatecomics.com.
Let's go there. Sunshine State Comics.
What was it there?
Boom, baby. Yeah, I always look forward to your cartoons in the morning.
Thank you. I've been building that actually because I'm getting set to get a either an Indiegogo or Kickstarter up. I'm going to do a hardcover collection of the Sunshine State strips. Yeah,
And
there
this
we go.
is,
Yeah, that's the newest one.
yep, I went straight to the page and bam. I love the simplicity of it, and I like your colors on it. I'm assuming you do all of it.
Oh yeah, yep. And you asked me what's my favorite thing to draw, or you said you prefaced it with what character.
Now, what
Really,
character that's not yours?
right. My favorite thing to draw, period, is Sunshine State. It's very personal. I have a lot of satisfaction with it. I get to utilize a whole bunch of different skills: humor, writing, drawing, coloring, everything. Um, and when I'm done with a strip, I look at it and say, "Oh, I've got this standalone piece of art now that I'm happy with because of its humor or its narrative or whatever." And if I could monetize that in a way that I could actually make a living, that's what I would be doing.
Yeah, and you brought up something a minute ago, and I just want to mention again is like I think one of the things that changed the future of how we do what we do is what do they call it? Campaigns to get people to invest.
Oh, crowdfunding?
Crowdfunding. Crowdfunding changed what we do a lot and how we go about it. And I know it like when I did the first tried to do Vindicated, which I'm still working on, by the way, but I pretty much let, except for Shane Moore, everybody else was fired. And Shane Moore is not the writer on it. He's just a character within the book. But I got so frustrated because with the writers, who were the only ones who got paid,
Oh,
I was like, I got to go back. And I threw stuff out. But now a mutual friend of yours and mine is working with me on it, Barry Branscombe.
oh, okay, good.
Yeah. And I said, what I need you for is I don't need you to write it for me. I need you to make sure that I'm consistent, be my editor, as well as step in and make sure that my stories have that connective thing that I'm having trouble with. Because each chapter is its own story, but it is an overarching story to the entire thing.
Right.
And I don't know if I ever showed you the books or not when they were done. I know Chuck's seen them and he loved them.
Yes, yeah, I've seen them. Yep.
And but chapter 2 is now split up into a chapter 2 and 3 because that was my frustration, and Barry helped me solve the problem. And have you ever had that problem when you're doing the writing? Do you ever have to lean on Chuck to help you with some of your stories to make sure you're being cohesive in your writing?
No, I've never had to do that. I have asked Chuck his opinion on certain things. In fact, the whole Joe Frankenstein thing came about because originally Joe Frankenstein was going to be like it was going to be called Doc Frankenstein, and it was going to be a pulpy kind of superhero type thing, like Doc Savage. And then there's the Dr. Frankenstein. There was that whole tie-in, and the whole concept is predicated on that name. And then I found out the Wachowski brothers had already trademarked it. They did some crappy comic for some other publisher, and they trademarked Doc Frankenstein, so I couldn't use it. So I went to Chuck and I was asking him, what should I do? What can I do with this? And he said, well, just change the name, and I said, I can't do that, because I need this. I need this thing for the theme to work and everything. And I said, I just can't, use something as mundane as Joe Frankenstein. And there's a pause, and he goes, "That's a great name." And then it got my mind thinking in a totally different direction too. Is to to bring it back down to a more ground level story, and then I came up with the whole idea of this kid, not knowing that he's the last descendant of Victor Frankenstein, and that his family has been watched over by the monster for the last 250 years because the monster is, doing his penance for killing, his creator. And Chuck and I started talking about that, and that's when I said, "Hey, do you want to come in and work on this too?" And he did, and that's how that came about. But the point being that I'll always, if I have a question about something, Chuck usually has an answer on how to fix something.
He's a sharp dude.
He's very sharp. He knows how to break a story down.
I love, because we all, I always talk about the fact that you and I belong to a super duper secret group of comic pros that get online and chat amongst each other about things.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Fight Club. We're not allowed to give its name. We're not allowed to talk about it, but I am sort of, so I'm sure that someone's going to kill me for it. But I love how, Chuck gets in there and shows his quick wit and his creative nature, even in his commentary on things. And you're the same way. I always look forward to seeing, when I get up in the morning, what's Graham saying this morning, what's Kelly Jones saying this morning, and what's Chuck Dixon saying this morning.
3 loudmouths.
3 loudmouths. And I've kind of brought myself into that group a little bit to where you guys have accepted me, even though I'm still a nobody.
We're all nobodies. Nobody. I go down to 7-Eleven. Nobody knows who I am.
Nobody knows who the hell you are. Yeah, show up at a convention and everybody's like, "Ah!" But yeah, because you and I, we promised a long time ago that the first time we get to hang out, we're going to down Guinness. Even though I stopped drinking, I'm so going to have a Guinness with you, and probably a really good Irish whiskey, Bushmills for me. But you like Jameson's,
because there's no carbs in whiskey.
That's right. But I also love Guinness because it's amazing. I'm looking forward to the day when they figure out how to make a non-alcoholic one for me. They never will, but it's a dream. Well, Keith, you got anything? You were starting to ask him a question. I think I interrupted you.
That's all right. That's all right. But no, I was just going to ask, just like I did yesterday. Who was someone that you admired in the business that you've gotten the chance to work with, or at least gotten a chance to know personally?
Did you get to meet Kirby?
Yep.
That would be, I bet that's your number one.
I got to meet Kirby. I got to meet Stan. I got to meet and work with Archie Goodwin.
Oh, yeah.
Danny O'Neill. There's been a lot of Dick Sprang.
Wow.
Jim Aparo. Jim and I actually became pals. I used to call him the next day after an episode of Seinfeld was aired because he loved Seinfeld, and we would talk about the episode and stuff. And I bought him a T-shirt that had the Kramer on it.
Oh my God, the artwork, yeah.
Yeah. It sent it to him for his birthday once, so yeah. Trying to think who else. I actually made a list of everybody I've met. And
did you ever meet my inspiration in comics was Al Williamson? Yep,
I met Al.
He had the biggest impact on how I draw.
Yeah, John Romita, that was another one.
Oh,
who was my first? In fact, there's Johnny.
Yep, there you go.
Yeah,
I consider him the best cover artist from his time. I always considered Kirby weak on doing covers.
I agree. I when he hit it, Kirby's was amazing, but he didn't. He was more concerned with moving the story along, rather than that.
And he was really good at that, at that cinematic story, that visual storytelling. But to try to tell you what the entire story was about in one image, his covers always fell flat. I think one of the few I liked, I think it was him, was the. Didn't he do the Mole Men cover? Wasn't that Kirby?
The Mole Man cover?
Yeah.
I think that was.
It was one of the few covers of his that really stuck in my head that I liked. It was the Fantastic Four and the creatures coming up out of the ground.
Yeah, issue 1 or 2 was Fantastic Four. Yeah,
that's issue 1, yeah.
Yeah.
Wasn't that Kirby that did that cover?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. That is absolutely my favorite Kirby cover, period.
I like FF12.
What one?
FF12.
Oh, 12, number 12?
Yeah, that's my all-time favorite covers. The Hulk is up against the wall in a cave.
I know the one you're talking about.
talking, and he says, in a moment, I'll destroy them or something like that, you know. And the Hulk is very Frankenstein-y looking and big, and he's got hairy forearms. He looks just badass, you know, and it's like, oh my God, the FF's going to get killed.
I always found it fascinating about Kirby that he never took anatomy. Like a lot of us studied anatomy. I mean, I actually went to medical school, and so I learned anatomy, how everything works. And that guy did not understand anatomy, but God, he drew some dynamic characters doing things.
I would argue that if you look at his early stuff, he did have he stylized and became more abstract in his interpretation of anatomy. But when you look at his early stuff, you could tell the guy knew where things go, when, and everything, and knew how to put a figure together. I mean, he worked for Fleischer Studios too, you know, as an in-betweener doing cartoons. You know, the guy could draw, you know, but you know, his style became, you know, he had like different levels of style. He had his Captain America style, then he had the horror romance style from the 50s, and then he had the early Marvel style, and then he had the more impressionistic or not impressionistic, but abstract style that we all know, with the blocky, you know, fingers,
Right.
you know, all that, you know, that he eventually developed, you know, and that's when his power, you know, it was all about power then, you know. He wasn't concerned with the nuances of musculature.
When you look at his panels, they're just, each image is so dynamic. There's nothing boring.
No.
That guy.
Yeah.
Even though I would never draw like him, he still had an impact on me as an artist.
Oh yeah.
For doing layouts, because when I do my layouts, I always think, how would Kirby draw that? You know, and that's where he had an impact on me. And then, of course, I start drawing, and it comes out looking like Al Williamson. In fact, Tom Waltz, I said it in our previous interview, referred to me as today's Al Williamson. It was absolute bullshit rubbish. But I love the compliment.
Hey, nothing wrong with that.
Get to it. Keith, ask a question.
I've got to ask this question. Now, as I had brought up before, you were there around the time with Batman when Azrael became a big deal. Okay, could you talk about the first time you found out about doing that entire storyline?
The Nightfall storyline? I had done a couple issues of Detective Comics, filling in. They were having trouble. I think Tom Lyle had left and Mike Nasser was doing it, or vice versa. I can't remember. So they had me do 3 or 4 issues. And on the strength of that, you know, they were already talking about doing the storyline where they were going to take Batman out and replace him with a more violent Batman. The reason being is that, you know, Denny was catching a lot of grief from the fans because the Punisher and Wolverine were selling like crazy, and they felt that, you know, Batman should kill his enemies the same way these guys do. And so Denny thought, well, this is a great way to show them why they're wrong. Let's take Batman out and replace him with a Batman that does kill, and we'll show you why, you know, Batman is so great as he is. But they didn't have a character in his canon to do that, so he had to be created. So, you know, the idea was to create basically an evil Doc Savage, somebody that's super smart and super strong to take out Batman. So, you know, I got a call from Chuck, you know, kind of telling me a little bit about this, and he said, you know, that Scott Peterson would be calling if you, or would you be interested in doing it, you know, and designing this character. And I'm like, yeah, sure, that sounds great. You know, I'd love to work with you again. You know, that's how it came about. And then Chuck and I talked it back and forth. He gave me some background information. And then I, you know, came up with the designs based on some story elements and some of his background info that Chuck had filled me in on.
Wow. How does it feel?
I like that. Well, I wanted to add to it because this is something that's come up in many conversations over the years between you, Chuck, Kelly Jones, and I, and others that are in the group, talk about, you know, Batman killing, because I've always been of the understanding that, look, he has to be aware anytime he hits somebody in the head that he might kill them. But his intent is not to kill them, is to incapacitate. And that's what I've always appreciated. But I've also always said that it's an accepted possibility for Batman in my head that that person might inevitably get killed in this confrontation. But his goal is not to do it.
Right. Yeah, he would do everything he could to not do that. But I think that just like, I don't believe in the no gun BS, that Batman won't use a gun. In fact, Chuck and I addressed that in the storyline with Deadshot. I think it's Dead. Yeah, Deadshot, and there was another guy. And Gunhawk too. There was a sequence where one of the guys was going to kill somebody, and Batman picked up a sniper rifle and, like, from half a mile away, took him out. Because he had no other option. And at the end, he's angry at himself that he had no other option. But Batman knows how to use every weapon at his disposal, including a gun.
Yeah, if necessary. Yeah, agree wholeheartedly. Nobody would train to fight and not know how to use that.
Yeah.
Now, what were you about to ask, Keith?
Well, I was just going to ask, how does it feel to have been on, to have helped to create or at least guide certain characters? And what I'm getting to is both Bane and Azrael, and then to see them brought to life, as interpreted by Hollywood, and in shows like Batman the Animated Series. How does, you obviously did a lot of the groundwork for those characters, and now you're seeing them reinterpreted and, kind of, whenever you get a chance to watch them. I mean, how does that feel?
Azrael was designed by Joe Quesada. So I didn't have any hand in that. But obviously Bane, the first time I ever saw him in any kind of multimedia was in the animated series, and I thought that was a gas, seeing that.
Well, that was a great series.
Yeah, it was excellent. It was my favorite interpretation of him. I haven't liked any of the movie versions.
Yeah. The version that talks like a muffled Sean Connery.
Yeah. And then the other one, he's just a big dummy,
Oh my God. Yeah, it's like he's the Hulk.
Mm-hmm. I'm hopeful, though. I mean, with the success of that Joker movie, that the possibility exists that they could do a standalone Bane movie. Because think about it, the story is so engrossing about this guy who's born into servitude, in this prison, and he's a complete innocent, and he's molded by the environment in which he's in. I think that's one of the cool things about the character is that, in his point of view, he thinks the world owes him something. He's an innocent. He never committed any crimes or nothing. It was his old man that did it, and he got sentenced to it just because he was born there. So when he does bad things, he thinks, I'm going to get mine. The world owes me this, and I think that's an interesting.
Well, what's important when you're writing a good villain is to have a character that doesn't see what he's doing is wrong.
Sure.
He feels justified. Yeah. Best villains.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true of any villains. I don't think Hitler thought.
Oh no, he thought he was doing the right thing.
Wrong. I mean, that's what makes them villains is that they don't have a sense of right and wrong.
Yeah. Villains like Doctor Doom, Magneto, Lex Luthor, and of course Khan Noonien Singh. Those are just right off the top of my head some of the best villains created. So
right. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's the most important thing in writing that I was taught, that if you're going to have a story that's going to have a bad guy, you have to flesh out that bad guy and make him interesting, because your film is only as good as its bad guy or comic book.
Yeah.
He has to have an aspect that you can relate to, because you're not going to see yourself as a bad guy, but you can see something in this guy that, hey, this guy's a bad guy, but you know what? I'm sort of like that too.
Yeah, I even said something to my daughter just recently. I said, I told her, I said, I'm 90% of the human beings who have met me in their life consider me a good guy, but there's a small percentage of people who consider me the villain of their lives. I said, everybody can be a villain. It's a fact.
Yeah.
You got any other wrap-up questions, buddy? Because I have one.
Yeah, I'm gonna let you just end it all on your question.
Who gave us our name for this show?
I love the name of the show. I think it's genius.
I do too. Who was that, Keith, that gave us that name? It was that guy right there that named our show.
Right there.
Yeah.
Pop Culture Minefield, all thanks to Graham Nolan. And I got to tell you, man, I really do cherish our friendship. Handful of people on this planet I enjoy talking to. You are on that list of top 10 people.
Excellent. Nice to be there.
Yeah, and I know Keith is so. I think he likes being friends with me because he meets such interesting people.
Well, I like you a lot too. I mean, that's the thing.
That's an afterthought.
So well, it's just a side benefit that I get to meet all these interesting people. So,
well, Graham, I really appreciate you coming on, man, and spending some time with us. I'm going to try to get Chuck to be our next one in line because you guys are, I got to do the two together. I mean, if I hadn't worked with Chuck, I would have never become friends with him. If I hadn't become friends with him, I never met you. And so I'm always grateful for Chuck. Good guy.
Yep, he is a good guy.
Yep, straight shooter.
Straight shooter. That's right.
And I also like that we're fans of cigars.
What's that?
I like that we're fans of cigars.
Yeah, I'm gonna have some nice weather Sunday. I might go out there and light up a stick.
Oh, nice. I always look forward to the photos that you post of drinking whiskey and smoking cigars.
Yeah, I got a filthy hooligan with my name on it.
Yeah.
That's what it's called. Filthy hooligan. It's got a big Irish shamrock on it.
Oh, I saw that. Yes. I saw it. You posted a picture of that. Beautiful.
Yeah, I got
Beautiful. It's got that brownish green,
Yeah, it's triple wrapped. There's 3 different leaves in it. It's like a barber pole style.
How do they do that? Okay, that's their trade. That's their trade. Yeah. They're not allowed to tell us how they do it, but they did that. That's amazing. Well, anyway, thanks for being on the show, Graham. Appreciate it. Guys. I'll keep watching your page and say hello to Julia for me.
I will. And thanks for having me on, guys.
Bet we'll do it again. Next time you got something big coming out.
Sounds good.
All right, take care, brother.
Yep, we'll see you.
Hey guys, thanks for watching Pop Culture Minefield. If you've enjoyed the show, please remember to like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell icon. Remember, you can find us at Pop Culture Minefield on both Facebook and Instagram. Thank you again.